So the fourth phrase in that pasuk, V'yatzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham b'yad chazaka v'zoh nituya u'v'mar gadol u'v'yosos. Osos literally means signs, or the double entendre could also mean letters, like the word os. And because of that double entendre, Chazal reinterpret this as a reference to the Mata. V'yasa osos, the Haggadah writes, Zehamata, this is the staff of Moshe. Now how do Chazal understand, or how do Chazal associate the Mata with the word osos? So in part because of that pasuk in Shmos when HaKadosh Baruch Hu delivers the Mata to Moshe. Hinei hamata zeh tikach biyadecha. Hashem tells Moshe, here is the staff which you should take. Asher ta'aseh bo es ha'osos, which you will perform these miracles. So because in Parsha Shmos the Mata is oriented towards the performance of miracles, so in Parshas Kisavo the word osos refers to the Mata. In part because Chazal have a Masora that the staff had certain letters or writings inscribed on it, whether it was the name of Hashem or whether it was Ditzach Hadash Biachav, the Rashi Tevis of the ultimate Makos. But somehow Chazal are able to associate the word Osos and Kisavo with the Mata. But the question is, who cares? Why is it so important to remember the Mata when we talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim, whether it's the person bringing Bikurim, whether it's the night of Pesach? Why is the Mata so important? So I spoke about this a little bit in last year's section, that the staff decentralizes Moshe. The staff reminds us that it isn't Moshe's miracles, magic, charisma, but it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the staff is the conduit, just as Moshe is a conduit. And maybe if Moshe, of course, is very humble and very unassuming, but others would see in Moshe a miracle worker, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to decentralize Moshe, and there's this very famous medrash in Shmos where HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe that if you refuse or if you defer my shlichus, I can even perform these miracles through a staff. So the staff reminds us that it isn't Moshe. And that's why Moshe's name isn't even mentioned during the Haggadah, because this is a night where we want to clean the stage or clear the stage. There's only one being on stage, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Mata is a bit of a reference to Moshe. But there's a different reason and a different aspect to the Mata. It's a very famous medrash or Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah says there were 10 things which were created during the first week, during the first 6 days of creation, but during Ben Hashmashos, which is a strange Mishnah. We could turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, and say, make up your mind. If it's part of the Bria, if it's part of the original creation, then these things should be created during the proper time, during the central, basic 6 days. If it's not part of the Bria, why try to slip them in Ben Hashmashos? So the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos talks about these 10 things. So one of them is the Pia Be'er, the Be'er that produced water in the desert. One is Pia Aretz, the land which engulfed Korach during the earthquake. Pia Son, the talking donkey. Keshes, the rainbow of Noah. Haman, Hamata, and the staff. So again, why are these 10 things? These are just 7 of them. Why are they created during the 6 days of creation, but not really during Ben Hashmashos, as we would say, during overtime? Is it part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creation or not part? So the Rambam, based on this Mishnah, proposed a very, very famous position, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu performs a miracle, we assume that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's miracles are supernatural interventions, which nature has its own course and its own cycle, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu descends into nature and disrupts nature and rearranges nature. According to the Rambam, any miracle was already pre-programmed when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. So, for example, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to split the sea, then when he created Yam Suf, he pre-programmed its DNA, its molecular structure, so that 2,448 years into history, the water of the Yam Suf would split, would separate. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted the sun to halt 2,488 years, 40 years later, when Yoshua was fighting, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu pre-programmed the sun's orbit so that 88 years, 89 years into history, the orbit should halt at a certain time on Erev Shabbos when Yoshua needed more time to defeat his enemies. Basically, nothing is left to chance, nothing is introduced. HaKadosh Baruch Hu pre-programs everything. It's all part of nature. And we're sometimes unaccustomed to thinking this way, and not everyone agrees with the Rambam, and by and large, I would say the dominant position, the conventional approach, the traditional approach is to view miracles as different from the Rambam's, to view miracles as HaKadosh Baruch Hu altering nature and intervening in nature. But not according to the Rambam. According to the Rambam, miracles are pre-programmed and predetermined. There's a very interesting Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos talks about a man who dies, and he leaves a child to be nursed. I'm sorry, not a man, a woman who dies, leaving a child to be nursed. And the man, of course, is poor, so he can't afford to hire a wet nurse, so he has no choice. And Kadosh Baruch Hu creates a miracle, and he begins to lactate, and he grows parts of his body that normally produce milk in a female body, and he grows them on his body, and he begins to lactate and produce milk. And when Rabbi Yosef heard about this story, Rabbi Yosef thought this man is such a great person that Kadosh Baruch Hu was willing to intervene and alter the course of nature, that a man can nurse a child. And Abaye said, no, this is not an important person. Adarabba, kama garua adam zeh. This is an inferior, insignificant person, undervalued. Shenishtanu lo sidre gracious. That he has to become a freak of nature in order to feed his child. I mean, if he were really important, then maybe his wife shouldn't have died to begin with, or maybe he should have had money to afford a wet nurse, or perhaps a neighbor would have offered it freely and volunteered. So sometimes, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu really cares about something or someone, then he should plan for it in advance. If you come to my house for Shabbos, and as you walk in Erev Shabbos, 2-3 minutes before Shabbos, I'm making the bed and putting some extra chicken into the oven, that shows that I really could care less about your presence and haven't planned for it. But if you walk in and everything is made and prepared, and that shows it's something I've taken into account beforehand. So according to the Rambam, nisim that are important, that affect Jewish history, that affect the Jewish people, are predetermined, are pre-programmed. They are already factored in during Sheshis Yimei Bereishis, the first 6 days of creation, but they can't really be part of the 6 days of creation because they're not natural, they're not normal. They're part of nature, but they're unique parts of nature. They're once in history parts of nature. So that's why these items, whether it's the Mata or the Be'er or the ground of Korach or the Man or the rainbow, have to be created during the 6 days of creation, but not during the 6 days proper, during that extra session, or the overtime session, the Bein Hashmashos. So in the Mishnah in Avos, in Parakeh, Mishnah of Av says HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Mata. The point is HaKadosh Baruch Hu took this Mata and incapacitated it, empowered it, programmed it with all the miracles that it would ultimately deliver. So on the night of Pesach, at least according to the Rambam's position, when we say Ves Hamata Hazeh Tikach Biyodecha Asher Taseh Bo Es HaOsos, and the Osos in Parshas Kisavo V'Yotzienu Hashem Elokeinu Mishem B'Yad Chazaka V'Zohar Netuya V'Mar Gadol V'Osos, and hagadah Chazal interpret Osos to mean Mata. We're ultimately referring to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he created the world, had so many things on his mind, so to speak, from our vantage point, from our perspective. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was creating a cosmos and a universe, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises Avram Avinu that his children will be as plentiful as the stars in the heaven and the grains of sand. Kachol hayom, the koch ve'ashamayim larov. And I always thought that there was an inequality here. There are far more grains of sand than there are stars in the cosmos, in the universe. But recent science has shown that there are probably as many stars as there are grains of earth, which boggles the imagination, how many stars there are. Because our Milky Way our solar system is just a small part of the galaxy, and how many galaxies have been discovered, it's just numbers can't capture. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was busy fixing all those planets and nature and oceans and so much on his mind. But he also was concerned about one thing. What's going to happen the 15th night of Nisan, 2,448 years into history? I better prepare, because these are my people and I love them, and their needs are in some ways more important. Bishvil Adam Nivra Ha'olam, the entire world was created for man. Bishvil Yisrael Nikra Nivra Ha'olam. But for Am Yisrael, Bereishis, Bishvil Yisrael Shenikra Bereishis, Bereishis Bar Elokim. The very beginning, the inception of our world, when the universe was being massed and pieced together, Kadosh Baruch Hu was concerned with Am Yisrael, with the night of Pesach, and he capacitated the Mata to perform those miracles. So when we say also Zehamata, we're reminding ourselves of our love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for us. that he worried about the night of Pesach and all the miracles associated with the Matzah from the beginning of creation.